Making spirits is one thing, making kosher for Passover spirits is another, and we're going to explore both on this episode of The Jewish Drinking Show, bringing L'chaim to life. Welcome, everybody. I'm your host, Rabbi Drew Kaplan, and I'm very excited to welcome first-time guest of the show, Ari Klafter. Ari, welcome.
Hi there. Glad to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Ari, since I don't know much about you, I assume our listeners don't know much about you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. I'm Ari Klafter. I am the head distiller of Thornton Distilling Company, maker of Dead Drop spirits. I've been making distilled spirits here for about 4.5 years. We make a variety of different products. All are OU and Tartikoff kosher certified. That's a huge part of who we are and what we try to do. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to go through some of the products that we have later today, and also tell you a little bit about our single malt, which is not ready yet. We're anticipating launching that in late 2023, but that's a big focus of ours.
Can I, just because I'm curious, is that because of the relatively recent categorization for American single malt?
Actually, it's something I've been wanting to do for about 7 years, or like,
oh, really?
As long as I've been in distilling. I studied distilling in Scotland. Mm-hmm. With a big focus on single malt whiskey. That's part of it. Mm-hmm. Part of it is just, that's what I think is really, I find single malt just fascinating, and I love the flavor profile and the differences between different distilleries and what you get in the product. Also, just the fact that our distillery is housed in the oldest standing brewery in Illinois. Oh, wow. So it's original brewery from 1857. Mm-hmm. They were using malted barley to make beer here back in the day. We want to sort of keep that legacy alive, and want to do that as a distillery by making single malt whiskey.
So what do you love about barley or single malt barley?
I could go on for a while. There's a handful of things that I really love. I love a pot distilled spirit that is one that does not run through a column. So it creates a heavier, more robust spirit where you also get more flavor from the raw ingredients. In this case, malted barley.
So let me back up, maybe for our listeners or even me who know less about the different types of stills. There's pot stills, column stills. There's probably other types of stills. So and I see behind you, you've got some stills. I don't know if you can point at them, but
absolutely.
How do the processes differ? And we can even get into your products and how you play around with the different types of stills and the different types of actions and how they affect the product. So that's a lot, but yes.
Fair enough. Yeah. I've actually got two stills behind us. Both of them we run as pot stills.
How long were you in Scotland learning?
A little over a year. So I did a master's degree in brewing and distilling at the Heriot Watt University. They have the International Center of Brewing and Distilling there. It was essentially set up as a university program. It was set up by the Scotch whiskey industry during the 60s, I believe, as a way to train the next generation of talent. They realized that it's a very, very technical process. They want to have institutional knowledge and create a pipeline for their industry to grow. So they set this up.
I was also thinking that's kind of like 60s, 70s was kind of a dead time, right, for Scotch? Or at least stateside, it was. People weren't really interested in whiskey for a few decades there.
Yeah, it was a strange time. People were going, again, towards like lighter flavored distillates, like you found vodka did very well. Whiskey, not so much. But anyway, they did try to create this brewing and distilling program. There's also, create a pipeline for the brewing industry.
For the UK.
Yes.
I was going to say, America's doing all right with brewing.
Yeah, they've always done okay.
Or are you saying in the 60s that was the intent?
I think in the 60s that was part of the intent.
Oh, okay.
As well.
Beer was in a very different place back then. Okay.
Yes. You were seeing all this consolidation. And, you basically had these companies that were going to need quite a bit of workers and technical workers focusing on different areas. So they really wanted to give them an intense scientific background.
Yeah. By the way, that was happening. I don't know what was going on in UK. America was going 50s, 60s. That was like the low point for like the least amount of breweries in American history.
Yeah.
Outside of Prohibition. But it was, when Prohibition ended, so you have all these breweries popping up, but then consolidation happens, and then you have until the late 60s, and then it starts to push back. But
yeah, and that actually happened here in this building. So I think I mentioned it's the oldest standing brewery in Illinois. It was founded by a German immigrant, John Bielefeld, in 1857. And he chose this area because there's a limestone filtered artesian well on site. So it's a natural place to get really, really good quality brewing water. And as it runs through limestone, that also adds nutrients and takes out iron, which can be not so great for yeast to work with. So back in the day, before they're able to do a lot of treatment of water, that was a huge advantage. Where I'm going with this is so it remained a brewery all the way up into Prohibition, where it was officially shut down, did continue operating illicitly. But after Prohibition, they tried to start a bunch of new brewing brands here, and each one just couldn't get a foothold. Because at that time, the industry had consolidated so much. You know how it had refrigerated train cars. People could have more large scale distribution of beer than they had in the 1850s. So these small regional breweries really had a tough time building a brand, becoming competitive, and staying in business.
But you mentioned you have a master's in also brewing. Do you ever do any brewing, or you mostly direct your brewing efforts for the sake of distilling?
I do distilling. I started out brewing as a hobby, and that's how I got all into this. It was when I turned 21, I got really into craft beer. Figured out that people did this as a hobby, and then just got really bitten by the bug of just brewing beer, much more so than consuming it. I founded a brewing club at my university, called it A2 Brute.
Yeah, that's good. Where'd you go undergrad?
Swarthmore College.
Oh, cool.
Pennsylvania. So I got really into brewing, and that sort of kept going for several years. And then I developed a taste for distilled spirits, and also saw that industry growing in the coming years. So I want to be part of that. So no, I don't make beer these days. I'm happy to focus on distilling, and that certainly keeps me busy. But my approach to making single malt whiskey is kind of informed by my beer brewing background. So I make two main single malts that we're going to be coming out with, in about a year. We make one peated product that it uses Illinois peat that we hand harvest, and then we give it to a local maltster, and they smoke a Pilsner malt to make that. And then it's really cool. That's, it's a light style malt. You'd find it in a lot of lagers. It's very delicate, very bready. But our unpeated whiskey is a little more robust in the malt profile. We use a pale brewer's malt. I use a Munich malt, a British style brown malt, and then specialty. They call it specialty dark. There's traditionally it's called Special B, but that's trademarked by a Belgian maltster, and it's got this really a lot of dark flavors of stewed fruits, raisins, that kind of thing. The brown malt's kind of toasty and roasty. It's very reminiscent of coffee. The Munich is a little bit more bready, has a lot of bread crust. It's a little bit floral. And then the pale malt is very delicate. And I kind of constructed that the way that a brewer would put together the mash bill of a beer. It's very uncommon to see just a beer that's constructed just using base malt. They typically try to layer different flavors using the malt. And that's something that I found a little limiting by the way that most single malt producers are making their spirit. It's a lot more expensive to do it that way, but I'm able to, I think, tailor the flavor of the new make spirit a little bit better and get some of those flavors that I'm trying to get by taking a more conscious approach to it.
Hey there, I wanted to break in. Hopefully you're enjoying the show so far, and give you a sneak peek into next week's episode to start putting us in the mindset about the Passover Seder.
This is not solely just someone drinking to a point where they can tap into this awareness, bring it back with them. It reifies their commitment to mitzvot and to this way of life.
I hope you enjoy that sneak peek into next week's episode featuring Rabbi Zach Kamenetz. And now back into this episode with Ari Klafter. I want to talk about this kosher-for-Passover rum.
Yes.
So how did you, I know we're talking about all these different grain products, and grains are good. Grains are great. I love my whiskeys, but a spirit for Passover. So how'd you come up with this kosher for Passover rum? What's the story behind that?
This came about for a couple reasons. My business partner, Jake Weiss, is Orthodox, and we always wanted to have all of our products be kosher certified.
Mm-hmm.
And before joining Thornton Distilling, coming aboard as the head distiller here,
Mm-hmm.
I was working at a distillery in Massachusetts that only made rum. So I had a lot of, practice in rum. I loved, I got a lot of appreciation with rum. And somehow between us putting our heads together, we decided, all the kosher for Passover, or let's say some of the kosher for Passover spirit products on the market were lacking.
Mm-hmm.
And there was an opportunity to harness the creativity and the quality that you find in craft distilling and the attention to detail with our desire to make some kosher for Passover spirits.
Mm-hmm.
So I really, really was able to sink my teeth in and make some rum from that, which I love. So we do have the.
So you started doing that out in Massachusetts before coming to Thornton.
I was working at a distillery that made only rum. We weren't making kosher for Passover spirit. That came about when I joined Thornton. We make a couple of different kosher for Passover spirits.
Really?
Yeah.
So aside from rum, then what else?
Yeah. So we started out, we came to market with a silver rum, an unaged rum, and then our barrel-aged rum, which you are drinking. Ooh. And then last year, we also launched.
I started getting confused. I was like, wait a second, what am I drinking? But you're right. It is barrel-aged, so I'm getting vanilla off. Yeah.
Yes. And we also, this last year, launched a kosher for Passover vodka and a kosher for Passover version of our gin.
Okay. Very neat.
Which is cool. But I would say, I really, this is one of my favorite spirits to make and to also drink.
What do you enjoy about making it?
Rum is a category that can go in so many different ways.
Mm-hmm.
You see so many different types of products on the market.
Mm-hmm.
They go through different types of stills. Some of them have added sugar, added flavors, that kind of thing. Some of them are barrel aged. Some of them are made from molasses. Some from like an evaporated cane sugar. Some from fresh pressed sugar cane. I love the breadth of the category, and I also love the flavor profile of rums that have no added sugar towards the end. A drier style of rum.
Yeah.
And I think that's also a category that has, become kind of really important to hardcore rum fans. You think about the people who love Barbadian rum, who love Jamaican rum. Part of the reason they do that is they consider it to be a more natural expression of the raw ingredient of the spirit. And anyway, that's just something that I love to make and I love to drink, a drier style of rum.
Very neat. So my question, how many kosher for Passover certified rums out there are barrel aged? I can't imagine there are many, right?
No.
Is it yours? Is it
any others?
Yeah.
I don't know if there are any others.
Yours is it then?
I think it is.
I mean, if you want a barrel aged spirit on Passover, I mean, this is great.
Exactly. So, part of it came with like, hey, I love rum. We thought it might be neat to do kosher for Passover spirits. Yeah. But at the end of the day, like, we're a whiskey distillery. We love to drink barrel aged spirits. And that's obviously not possible during Pesach.
Yeah.
So what if we were to make a rum that has a lot of the characteristics of barrel-aged spirits? So one of the things that we wanted to do with this is actually kind of make it similar in some ways to a bourbon. So to that end, we use a lot.
Which I just poured. I just poured your straight bourbon.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
So to that end, I use a lot of only new barrels for this. I'm able to work with our cooperage to get a bunch of different barrel profiles. Most of them have a medium char level, but I also use ones that have toasted heads. I've used a few barrels that are not charred at all, but are only toasted, which are really, really interesting and can be really standout spirits.
So with the non-charred barrels, how does that affect the flavors for this rum versus like this bourbon? You'll get, obviously you have char for bourbon, but for a non-char, how does that work?
I would say that a toasted barrel can be actually very sweet and vanilla forward, and it can also bring out some very delicate fruit and and sort of spice and floral notes. With a charred barrel, you get a lot more color. You also get a lot more caramel flavors. There's deep, bready flavors, and more of what I might call just kind of like oak, for lack of a better descriptor.
It works.
It's great. No, it's great, and I love the things that both of those can bring to a spirit. So right now, every new barrel that I use for single malt, and most of the ones that I use for rum as well, are both charred and toasted. And then on top of that, the barrel heads, basically the top of the barrel, which are
like the lids.
Yeah.
Okay. Is it the
lid? I call it the head.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know what it visually looks like.
Yeah. So if you look at a barrel and it's turned upside down, it's obviously sort of cylindrical, but then it's got a flat part on either side, right? Now, that's a lot of surface area that I think most spirits producers and most cooperages don't pay a lot of attention to. But some of us are now starting to request that those be toasted to bring out a lot of like vanilla characters and a lot of sweetness from that oak there.
Going from the Massachusetts rum distillery to Thornton, what's the relationship between Dead Drop products and Thornton Distilling?
The reason that we keep them separate is because we expect to release our single malts under the Thornton Distilling brand. And we want to make all these other spirits. I love making gin. I love making our old fashioned and our rums. Yeah. We did think that, however,
by the way, your gin, I love the very citrusy, very floral. It's very enjoyable.
Thank you. I could talk about that all day. I spent all last week making gin. This week I'm back to whiskey and making some absinthe as well. But the reason that we have them separate is because we think that Thornton Distilling Company is a great name. It's a great way to introduce our single malt. However, we don't want the other products to sort of, take attention away from the single malt. Yeah, when we do have that release, we also anticipate having a completely new label design, maybe bottle shape as well. So we thought it made sense to have two separate brands. The name, you asked about the name. That came about because
I forgot to ask. Dead Drop. Are you into spycraft? James Bond stuff. Where did the name come from?
Something like that. So, a little bit about our history.
Yeah.
Founded as a brewery in 1857, continued brewing operations up until Prohibition, was officially shut down. But because we are sort of outside the city of Chicago, there's not as much scrutiny on this area. So continued operating as a brewery. Yeah.
You're saying in Prohibition?
Yeah. During Prohibition, continued operating as a brewery. On paper, it was a soda pop bottling facility.
It worked.
Proved to be a front. And then it continued under the operation of the previous head brewer, but he was actually forced out by the Chicago syndicate and the Capone outfit to realize that
it wasn't the government. It's Chicago.
No. Although the Capone outfit did organize a government raid of the facility to push them out. And there's a Chicago Tribune article of federal agents dumping out like hundreds of barrels of beer in the creek behind here.
So sad.
Yeah, it's really a shame. Brings a tear to my eye.
Yeah, for all of us.
So continued operating as a brewery during Prohibition because, politicians are cheaper down here in the city of Chicago. It's easy to sort of operate your own little fiefdom. But you could still bring product from here to Chicago. So it made sense for them. And then after Prohibition, continued trying the brewing was officially recognized here again, but nothing ever really took off. I think we talked a little bit about them trying to bring back several different brands, but after a couple of years, each one just sort of fell, never really found footing. So for us, a Dead Drop is, you mentioned spycraft. A Dead Drop in its most essence, in its most essential term, is if you were to leave something illicit for somebody else to pick up, thereby minimizing risk, right? So it was also used, during Prohibition. You would leave, illicit alcohol for someone else to pick up at a later time. That way you don't have two people meeting at one point. Yeah.
Oh, so you're explicitly playing off of the Prohibition history of the physical space.
That's part of it. There's also a couple other components.
Okay.
One of it is us picking up where our predecessors left off. All that brewing history in this building it's quite a legacy.
Wait, when did Thornton start up?
The distillery.
Yeah.
I think we started producing in 2018.
Oh, so when you were hired, you came from Massachusetts. Were you the founding distiller?
Yes.
Oh, you were. Oh, I didn't know. Okay, interesting. So it was whomever the business partners are.
Andy and Jake had already started building a facility and had spent actually a couple of years putting together the building. They'd gotten some equipment, and then what was really lacking was somebody who knew how to create distilled spirits. That's sort of where I came in. But the third component of our name, Dead Drop, there is a limestone filtered artesian well here that was first tapped in 1857. Before that, there was actually a log cabin brewery on the premises that used the same artesian or the aquifer. So essentially, an artesian well is naturally pressurized. It is an underground aquifer that will push water through. We use that same well from the 1850s for all of our production water.
Oh, wow.
So every time I'm mashing, we're drawing from that. Whenever I'm cooling our stills, also taking water from there and even using that to proof down our products.
And so it's got to be an incredible like mineral pH stuff, right? You don't have to do.
Yes.
Do you do RO stuff? Like
we do for proofing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything else, we leave it untreated. It's actually excellent water for mashing.
Wow.
It is hard water because it runs through a limestone bed in our town. If you ever come to and you should definitely come to Thornton.
I'm in the Midwest. I should definitely, yes.
Yeah. It's got the largest limestone quarry in the Western Hemisphere. Yeah. It's a massive, massive quarry, just basically half a mile away from here. So there's a huge bed of limestone that water, and I think our spring is fed from Lake Superior, is going to run through. So it adds minerals, takes out a lot of heavy metals as well. So it's excellent for brewing. It's not great for proofing down because, as you mentioned, hard water, it's going to have a little bit of minerals in it. So to that end, we do run it through RO because I do want a very neutral water that's not going to affect the taste of our spirits.
Okay.
But we're still drawing from the same well, and even if it is treated, I think it's pretty cool.
With spring arriving, that means Passover is right around the corner. To help provide you insights and more into Jewish drinking at this time of year, where else to turn to than JewishDrinking.com? In addition to multiple episodes over the course of multiple years of episodes of the Jewish Drinking Show, there are also resources at JewishDrinking.com to provide insights, whether it's articles and more. Feel free to check out JewishDrinking.com/Passover to check out those resources. L'chaim. Am I crazy and then I get cinnamon out of your straight bourbon?
Not at all.
Okay, great. I'm enjoying the cinnamoniness of this. This is really cool.
I think what you're also getting is it's a higher rye mash bill. So it's like
So one of these days I'll develop a palate for ryes. I typically find them like just super spicy, very earthy. This is incredible. Maybe it is the rye.
I would say if like you're getting cinnamon, that's something that I usually associate with a little bit of rye, like a lot of those baking spices.
Yeah,
definitely.
Come
through there.
Exactly.
But yeah, I'm so glad you like it. I have a lot of fun making that one. For me, like it's really about choosing which barrels that you're going to create a blend with. So I'm definitely going for baking spice in there. But another thing that I'm trying to capture with that product and that blend as I put it together is a lot of stone fruit. Like I really love like the taste of, peaches and apricots and like stewed plums, that kind of stuff. So I love when that comes through.
Wow.
And then also trying to capture the vanilla quality that is just so magical in bourbon.
I wanted to break in really briefly. I'm Rabbi Drew, your host and founder of JewishDrinking.com. Turns out, as of this fall, the IRS has recognized Jewish Drinking as a 501c3 organization. You are always welcome to make donations. If you have any questions how to do so, you can check out the website or even simply email me at drew@jewishdrinking.com. Thank you. Now back into the show. This American pecan, this is a whiskey with pecans. So what's the story behind this little product?
So it actually started as a seasonal product. We decided we are going to do a pecan bourbon for the fall winter season, but it actually took off and is now one of our most popular products.
Wow.
To do this, basically start with a.
I was going to say it's very southern. You're mixing bourbon, which is a southern product, with pecans.
I know,
Yeah.
and here
And
we
it's-
are in Illinois. But
It's
we
also,
actually,
I will say, it's also, I mean, with the coming right off of the bourbon into this, it's a lot. I mean, the thing that I love, the warming spices, the cinnamon off of the bourbon. This is a lot smoother, right?
yeah.
Mm.
So the way that this, the way that we make this one is we work with one of the last remaining pecan farms in Illinois, and I get them to send me pecan wood. We then chop it up,
Really?
toast it. I actually bring it to a local kosher restaurant so I can use their oven and
Amazing.
toast the wood there in the wee hours of the morning.
Mhm.
And then we use that to mature with bourbon whiskey.
Mhm.
After that, I do another infusion with roasted pecans. So I feel like you get a little bit of the woody character and the nut, like the sort of nutty toastiness from the
Yeah.
wood. But then the pecans just add like a real rich mouthfeel.
Mhm.
It adds some sweetness. It makes it a very round product. And again,
Yeah.
we were just we were thinking of just doing this as a seasonal, but people seem to like it a lot, so we keep doing it.
I will say, as a stark contrast against the rum, the gin, the bourbon, they all have this like lingering spiciness, this back part of the palate and into the finish. This is, you mentioned the roundness, the smoothness all around. This is a lot more approachable for people who maybe not so familiar, maybe not have developed a palate for spirits. This is a lot more approachable.
Yeah, and we find that for people who are, not as immersed in spirits, this is a good place for them to start.
It's a good on-ramp.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
I tend to have this, if I'm doing like a lined up tasting, I tend to have this towards the beginning, and then you can start to get into the straight bourbon, and and definitely keep the absinthe for last.
Yeah, I'll get there.
Yep,
It's
yep.
funny because I know I don't usually. I mean, I should like. I'm sorry, I don't use absinthe so much. I mean, for me,
Yeah.
I definitely should use absinthe more. I really only just use it for a Sazerac cocktail. Like for me, Sazerac cocktails are amazing, but it's usually just for splashing out and then bringing in the whiskey and whatever else. But
And
what?
then, I mean,
What? Yeah.
I would say nobody uses a ton of absinthe. We
Right.
don't sell a ton of absinthe. I have a lot of fun making it. I actually am going to distill some absinthe tomorrow, but I use a very tiny still.
What do you enjoy about making absinthe?
It is such a
By the way, I'm just gonna straight out make a public disclosure. I am a weird person. Jelly beans are good, but black jelly beans are the best. And so for me, this is like, this is jelly bean heaven, black jelly bean heaven on the nose. The absinthe.
I'm gonna use that. Use that tasting note.
Feel free. And by the way, it's incredibly smooth. Also, just similar to the pecan whiskey. It's
Did you add any water to it? Because it's a high proof.
No. Straight.
Nice. I like your style.
We have video documentation.
It's true. And when you add water, I would know because it would turn like milky.
Mm-hmm. It's a really interesting finish, by the way. But certainly mouthfeel wise, as high proof as it is, which is basically 2/3, it's incredibly rounded, very smooth. And then you get black jelly bean on the finish, which is for the minority of human population that loves black jelly beans, it's incredible.
Yeah.
I count myself in that minority.
So do I. I'll eat black liquor straight. People tell me I'm crazy, but I love those spirits.
I'm excited to throw that in a Sazerac. So
yeah, please do.
Yes.
What I love about it is it's such a distiller's product. It's such it's such a traditional, old school product. You see those really traditional posters for absinthe in France and Switzerland.
Mm-hmm.
It's just got such a fun heritage and lore, and you just you have to love the process of distilling, and you have to love spirits to like it.
Why? From the distiller's end, look, I'm just a consumer. I assume
Yeah.
many of our listeners are, but from the production side, what's so fascinating about it?
It's tricky, the ingredients that you're using, and you're trying to create harmony of very intensely flavored ingredients. Wormwood is very intensely bitter and kind of astringent. Meanwhile, aniseed has that sort of licorice flavor. Fennel's a little spicier, almost a little grainy. You're trying to bring those things, and I also use angelica roots, cardamom, huge fan of cardamom, and a little bit of coriander as well.
I just have a big smile on my face. I mean, that is a delicious product.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Do me a favor, though. Pour some into a glass and then slowly add a little bit of water.
It's translucent. Everything else was transparent. This is translucent.
Exactly. That is lucian. That comes from the French word for milk. And what it is it's the essential oils of those botanicals falling out of solution at a lower proof. And it creates this really, really cool visual effect.
I just thought it was visual, but it affects mouthfeel massively. It's less smooth.
Yeah. It's a little pointed. And I think there's really a sweet spot. So I drink it, sometimes at full proof, but I also find around 45 to maybe 50% ABV. It's just really rounded and approachable and also kind of subtle. If you go too low, it's going to be a little too dry, a little
this is
sharp.
great. This is great.
It's fun. And so, what you just noticed is the lushing phenomenon. Now, my business partner, Andy, is amazing with puns. And he decided we're going to call this one Lucifer. But he's like, man, you keep talking about this lushing thing. What if we call the thing like Lucifer? And because absinthe is traditionally bottled at a high proof, because again, at lower proof, it'll come out of solution and turn milky. I was already like playing around with the formula to be around 65%. And then when he started talking about Lucifer, I'm like, I'm going to do it 66.6%.
Oh, it has nothing to do with 2/3. It's literally the numbers.
Yeah. 666, the number of the piece. And so
I thought it was 2/3 because I'm a math nerd. Okay.
6.6.
My math nerdiness is coming out.
Yeah, you get a little bar over the top.
Right.
So anyway, it's just a nerdy product. It's something that we love making, and then people who are like really into cocktails or really into spirits can appreciate. But because it's such a niche product, I actually only make it on a 10-gallon still. All of our other things, I have my 500-gallon still, and then I have our 170-gallon still back there.
So that's tiny.
It's tiny.
Wow. I mean, I suspect. I wonder how much of it is also that there's not a massive, not yet. There's still time to work on it, but massive demand in the kosher market for absinthe.
Yes.
I mean, also on top of that, people have not been used to having absinthe in their lives. It's only been legal in the US for a decade and a half. So this is still all within, it's not even of legal drinking age that has been legal in America. So I think that, I mean, just historical context. It's been a decade and a half. That's it. We're not used to having absinthe in our products.
No, you're absolutely right. And people, and because it was illegal for so long, there was
like a century.
Yeah.
And based off of faulty science, by the way.
Exactly. And there's there's all this weird, lore and mystique, and people are still kind of afraid of it.
Absolutely. Totally.
Which is kind of funny. But, if you think about, say Prohibition, where all alcohol was legal, people still remembered the time before that, where they were drinking beer, and there was that legacy. Absinthe has been illegal for so long that there's just no institutional knowledge. And so now we kind of have to start from square one to bring it back.
And by the way, that's not unique to the kosher market. It's just America and probably the West in general. Between France, US, the entire West, we don't have absinthe in our lives.
Yeah.
Going before a decade and a half ago. That's it. In addition to the many and plentiful resources that exist on jewishdrinking.com, whether it's secondary literature, fascinating insights, in addition to the really cool podcast, The Jewish Drinking Show, did you know that you can also provide interesting opportunities for your synagogue, JCC organization? And yes, that's me, bringing Rabbi Drew to help bring l'chaims to life, whether beer in the Bible, whether it's various Talmudic drinking stories, and more, I'm happy to chat, to talk to you, talk to your synagogue, your organization, your JCC, whatever it is. Feel free to reach out to me at drew@jewishdrinking.com and see how we can bring l'chaims to life.
Where I do think that there is room to grow, though, is a lot of Jewish drinkers are familiar with arak.
True.
They're familiar with other anise-flavored spirits. And so I think because the flavor profile is a bit similar, and this is, a type of anise spirit, I do think that there is a way to sort of, if you can get them around the name and you can, get them to try something new, there's a little bit of familiarity there.
Yeah. If you're Sephardi. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. But also I'm Ashkenazi. Okay. So I'm going to move on.
Yes.
I'm just going to call it dessert because it is absolutely gorgeously delicious, which is your old fashioned. Look, we have already shared, we have disclosed our love of whiskeys, but your RTD product, which is an old fashioned. So RTDs have been growing the last few years, certainly in the pandemic, but your old fashioned is it's a delicious dessert. So how did you come about this? And this is not like a typical old fashioned. You didn't just throw the typical ingredients in. So you threw in cherry bark, bitter orange peel, Saigon cinnamon, whole Tahitian vanilla bean. How did you come up with this product? This is absolutely gorgeously delicious.
Thank you. It's one that I really wanted to put like every ounce of my effort in, because I think for something like an RTD, there can be a little bit of a race to the bottom. It can be sort of just thought like, all right, we're going to formulate this for the mass-produced product.
It is deeply saddening, but yes.
Yeah. And that also leaves room to do a more high-end version of it, if you ask me. So
absolutely.
This is, so I really wanted to think about every component of that and try to do every component myself. So an old-fashioned, what is an old-fashioned? It is whiskey, sugar, bitters.
Yeah.
Now, the traditional approach from it would be to not really try to do like all that stuff yourself, or how should I put this? I wanted to be able to select the type of sugar that we're using and then make the bitters myself so that I have control of every aspect of the flavor. So,
wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm tasting that.
Yeah.
It is amazing.
Otherwise, you're leaving it in someone else's hands. And particularly if you're not, really thinking about the type of sugar that you're using, you're probably just going to use like traditionally used table sugar, which is a very neutral flavor. And I thought there's
versus what other options are there for sugar?
I use a Demerara sugar.
Okay.
So it is a natural type of brown sugar that has a lot of deep caramel notes, a lot of darker flavors, and I caramelize this. I actually use a large pot over an open flame, and I mix the sugar without any water for about 20 minutes, so it starts to caramelize and clump, and you get some of those deeper, more almost burned flavors from that. After that, we'll add water and create the syrup. Here's actually where I start to make the bitters. So instead of using alcohol to extract the flavors of your bitters, your bittering agents, and make bitters that way, I sort of harnessed my brewing background where I wanted to be able to use heat to capture flavors. So if you're making a batch of beer, you will typically add hops at different times throughout the boil, so they'll have different amounts of time in that boil.
Different bittering levels, right? You get bittering, flavoring, then aroma, right?
Exactly.
Yes.
So for me, I thought, well, what if I did that with our cinnamon, our cinchona bark, our wormwood, our spearmint, our bitter orange peel, and think about every aspect of those rather than having them macerate in alcohol for the same amount of time. What if I can layer that? That's kind of, again, my approach to making single malt whiskey is trying to, instead of making everything uniform, try to keep different flavor layers. So to that end, I'll take like the more the more, let's say, the heartier flavors that are going to be more bittering, had those go closer, have those be boiled for longer.
Mhm.
The lighter flavors might come at the very end or even at flame out. So they're not being boiled at all, but the flavor is still being extracted a little bit by the heat. And then I have a syrup that has both the sugar component and our bitters, and I can mix that with our high rye bourbon to create our old fashioned.
Wow. Wait, can I go on a ridiculous tangent?
Please.
How high rye is your bourbon?
It's actually 21%, so it's not crazy high rye.
Okay, but
It's
relatively high.
Yeah, relatively high.
Do you have malted barley in your bourbon?
Yes, small amounts.
Like 5%?
Yeah, 4%. To really add enzymes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the rye content actually works really well for the old fashioned because you have some botanicals that are spicy, kind of spice forward. You want those baking spice flavors to come through,
Yeah.
and
they do.
The richness that you're usually going to rely on corn to give that sweetness is going to come through either way because you're using, or I'm using the caramelized demerara sugar.
Are there any other prepackaged RTD old-fashioned cocktails that are, for lack of a better term, like deconstructed and then reconstructed old fashions like yours? I mean, old fashioned is such a simple cocktail, and yet you made it complexly delicious and easy to approach.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I would say, I mean, yes.
I apologize for all my compliments. I mean, this old fashioned is just incredible.
It's all right. Shower me with your compliments.
Yes.
I mean, yes. You know, I think because there are different types of companies or different types of distilleries, there's also different approaches to RTDs. And I think particularly with old fashioned, there are other distilleries that are trying to put their own mark on it. Tattersall Distilling makes a really cool one because they use their rye whiskey, but they also, I believe, use a cherry liqueur that they make. I might be mistaken on that, but I think that's what they do. So there are places that are trying to do their own twist on it. And
so you're saying in a general sense for old fashioned RTD cocktails, but which is incredibly helpful. And also with regards to kosher certified RTD old fashioned cocktails, yours sounds like it's going to be unique.
I certainly think so.
It's delicious. It's incredible. It has the bonus of being kosher certified. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. You know, that's
and I'm going to throw in, as I keep drinking it, I get some of those baking spices continuing. They're coming through.
Okay.
Yeah. It's great. I mean, I'm sure the rest of the year it's great, but winter wise, it's phenomenal. It provides warmth. Yeah. It's a good warmness. Yeah.
Exactly. And I know this is a, the Jewish drinking show, but here in like suburban Illinois, I get a lot of people telling me they taste like Christmas spices or taste like Christmas cake.
Yeah.
The idea is like
for the winter. It's amazing.
It's very winter, right?
Yeah.
And honestly, an old fashioned kind of is going to be. It's booze forward. It's it's made with whiskey and it's made with like these type of spices,
fruits and
right?
sugar.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I kind of like that. I like, whenever to take a step back. Whenever you make a product, you're making a number of different decisions, hundreds of different decisions, and you're choosing a vein. And like, you're not going to make an old fashioned that is simultaneously really, really light and summery, but also decadent. Like, you're not. You got to choose which way you want to play that. And I really wanted to sort of lean into that.
It's a terrible decision to have to make, summery or decadent.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, I think it's great around this time of year. We see a lot of traction with it. Also because for the holidays, we're considering different formats, but right now we have the 375. It's a perfect gift because it's not as expensive as if you were to make a 750. Yeah. It's the type of thing that you can share with somebody, and then a couple of people could drink in one evening.
Yeah.
And it's just a nice thing to share and hand out to your friends and family.
Absolutely.
So we do see a lot of interest around this time of year.
Ari, this has been incredibly insightful on so many levels, whether about Thornton, Dead Drop, distilling in general. Is there anything you would like to promote?
Keep a lookout for our kosher for Passover spirits this year.
So you have the unaged rum and you have a barrel aged rum also?
Yes.
Okay.
And a vodka and a gin. So the gin is actually the same exact recipe as our gin, except it uses a cane sugar based alcohol and uses a kosher for Passover coriander. And I don't use cardamom because that is considered kidney oat. So unfortunately, I'm not using cardamom for that. But otherwise, it is the same recipe as our gin.
That is deeply saddening. Okay.
I know. It is what it is. I love cardamom. I like to use it in our botanical spirits. So it is what it is. But so yeah, keep an eye out for our kosher for Passover spirits.
So 2023 is the first release of the kosher for Passover certified gin.
Last year was.
Oh, so 2022.
Yeah,
and
but it's
then
going to be a little more.
What about the barrel aged kosher for Passover rum?
That was 2 years ago. So 2020.
Ari, this has been fantastic, insightful, delicious. L'chaim.
L'chaim.